Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and finally Mercedes have revealed some major developments they're bringing to the W14. We've talked for some time now that they apparently had huge upgrades on the way, but only brought a new front wing in Silverstone with more promised here in Spa, a new rear wing and also brand new side pod design they've unveiled this weekend. Will it give them the performance they're looking for? We're going to look at all the images today. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. The drivers on their way to the Belgian Grand Prix. Thought it was kind of funny, Russell here and Daniel Ricciardo on the same private jet together on their way. I'm pretty sure Ricciardo flew out with Norris, did he not, to the previous Grand Prix. This time is here on the way with Russell, but they've all got there now, of course. One big update as well from Scuderia Ferrari, confirming that Laurent Marquez, who has, well, been with Ferrari for a long time now, he's officially leaving the team as of basically right about now. He will be joining Alfa Tauri next year. They're doing a lot of changes over there at Alfa Tauri for the upcoming season. That's the future. They've got a new guy in as his sporting director at Ferrari in place of Marquez, and there's been some rumours that potentially he could be a long-term replacement to Christian Horner down the line, and maybe he's getting some experience to do that, as in the same way I think that potentially James Vowles, what he's doing right now over at Williams, could be a potential suitor to replace Toto Wolff in the medium to longer term. Bit of cost cap drama as well, because it's simply impossible to escape at the moment. There have been some rumours that certain teams, presumably Mercedes and others, are not so happy with the way Red Bull are using their RB17 hypercar project. This is one of those projects that just so happened to conveniently arrive just as the cost cap was coming into effect here in Formula 1, and the rumour has it that we don't really have any images of this car yet, but it's Adrian Newey designs, and it's going to be pretty quick. It's a road car, you would think. So the development of the floor of this car, some teams believe, could also be valuable in Formula 1. Now, the teams are allowed to take any of their knowledge from their Formula 1 team and, help out that project, but they can't do it the other way around, especially when there's certain members of the F1 team that are splitting their time between working in Formula 1 and working on the RB17 project. It's raised questions. Now, it's very difficult to ever prove whether there's any nefarious activities ongoing, and Helmut Marko says that it's kind of difficult to separate this. There's a procedure. This whole cost cap is still too much interpretation and not enough facts. That's why there are discussions, and that needs to be sharpened up. So definitely some discussions about this right now, and it's not just Red Bull that have a project like this. Other top teams have similar projects like this as well, but there are debates as to whether certain teams are using this for an unfair competitive advantage. Also an update here, the rumour had it as of yesterday that both Pirelli and Bridgestone had had their offers accepted to potentially be tyre suppliers. Then it was down to Formula 1 themselves, the management group, to choose which commercial offer was the better one. And even though apparently Bridgestone made the better financial offer because the teams pay Formula 1 to supply tyres so they can get the advertising basically, Formula 1 actually has opted, rumour has it, in favour of Pirelli. So the tyres are not going to go anywhere, and it's going to be the same manufacturer, it seems, until 2027. This, I think, to many has been somewhat disappointing. I know that many were hoping for the return either of a tyre war, which I'm not sure is the best idea, or just another supplier, because I've not been convinced personally that Pirelli have done a great job with these compounds. Formula 1 has pretty tough specifications what it wants from its tyres. They need to degrade, but there also needs to be a degree of performance differential between the different compounds, and it's a pretty tricky balance to strike. I'm not convinced Pirelli have done a great job of that. We've seen a lot of boring one-stops, partially I think as a result of the not suboptimal, let's say, tyres that Pirelli I think have produced, and there's other issues with them as well. But Bridgestone will not be allowed to give it their go because Formula 1 have seemingly chosen to keep Pirelli around. Let's talk then upgrades and what the drivers are expecting this weekend. We know that Mercedes have been in dire need of a major change, especially when McLaren have taken big steps lately, and Mercedes will not be happy about being behind McLaren for too long. They've overtaken Aston Martin, right? Mercedes. I mean, Aston Martin have fallen back, but Mercedes have clearly brought upgrades that have taken them ahead of Aston. But McLaren have come from nowhere, so Mercedes still aren't the fastest Mercedes-powered car. And look, really what they're going for now is P2 in the Constructors. If they can secure that and they can get maybe a race win or two, they'd be certainly happy with that, I think, Mercedes, as they try and progress next year. But still, even Lewis Hamilton mentions in the same quote we just saw that there were times in Hungary where Verstappen was 8, tenths of a second faster per lap than everybody else. So that's when you know that the gap to Red Bull isn't exactly closing soon, but if they can make some steps, they'll put themselves in good positions for next season. It was confirmed by Toto Wolff there will be upgrades for this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix on the W14. It was quite a while ago now that Toto Wolff said there are huge upgrades in the works. Now, I think what he initially said was that there was going to be a huge upgrade in Silverstone and then something else in Spa. But in Silverstone, all they brought was a new front wing, which is pretty important, and they do believe that it did improve their slower speed performance, but it's not exactly a huge upgrade as far as I'm concerned to all the different elements of the car that clearly need improving. But Mercedes this weekend are bringing plenty of different changes, and this is potentially, maybe they had to delay, we don't really know, maybe they had to delay a couple of things, a couple of races further down the line to Spa, but it seems to me they've brought more this weekend in Spa than they did in Silverstone. Now, obviously the front wing as a piece of the car might be more important than the other pieces we're going to mention, but there are some significant changes to the W14, it's got to be said. These are the rear wings, as we always see. It wouldn't be a Thursday without an Albert Fabrega image of all the different rear wing configurations, and we can see that as usual, it does seem like Red Bull running slightly higher downforce. I think the same with McLaren actually. Red Bull typically do this because their DRS is so good, their straight line speed and the efficiency of their car is so good anyway, that they can actually often get away with running higher wings, preserving their tyres a bit better, and just being an absolute monster in the race. The Mercedes, though, have a brand new rear wing design, which I don't believe we've seen before. Seems to be an entirely new rear wing. I don't believe we've seen this this one before so far this season, and obviously a few changes that you'd expect to reduce the downforce, but in a way that they believe is going to give them some performance edge. So we'll see if Mercedes actually use it this weekend, because if it's going to rain, the teams will generally go for a higher downforce version, just because in wet conditions you really need all the extra downforce you can get. So teams, if they really think it's going to rain, because we've got a sprint this weekend as well, will more than likely opt for a slightly higher downforce version of this. So Mercedes might not get much chance, especially given it's a sprint weekend with not much practice time at all. One session on Friday, then quali, then the sprint shootout, then the sprint, then the race, to actually test this stuff. So it might be after the summer break where Mercedes really get to see whether this works as intended, and whether they even use the rear wing is another question entirely. But this is another big change to the cooling inlet of the side pods. Now, when the actual side pod is attached, we don't know how different it's necessarily going to look as of yet, but this is the pre-Belgian version on the left-hand side, which is a far more traditional like box shape approach, and this is what they're now going for, it seems, on the right-hand side here in Belgium, with a rather different approach to this side pod inlet. Whether this makes a massive difference, maybe not, but we did see this was an area of the car that Red Bull were tampering with a fair bit at the most recent race, the Hungarian Grand Prix. The biggest upgrade that Red Bull made was to the inlet of the side pod, making it slightly shallower, and also bringing on this extra front lip of the inlet, which effectively acts as a wing to generate even more downforce for the car. So another Adrian Newey classic on that one. Completely different to what Mercedes are doing, right? And this is why Lewis Hamilton is probably continuing to say, look guys, look at the Red Bull and make it look like that, you know, because that's kind of what McLaren have done and it's working for them. But these Mercedes upgrades have been in the works for some time, and it doesn't really seem like Red Bull are going to, well, Red Bull and Mercedes are going to completely converge by the time we get to next season. There's still plenty of differences and plenty of design ideas that are different between the cars, and it's not like Mercedes have now got to this point in the season and are bringing all changes that look like Red Bulls. It's not really the case. So this is the change to their side pod, and it's very different again to what we see on the Red Bull, but this is the one that I think will turn the most heads, is the side pod design. When they brought the the non-zero pods, right, when they actually put the side pod back in the car earlier this season, it was a relatively basic looking thing. There's nothing special about the way the side pod looks, especially compared to the Red Bull with the mass undercut they're going for. Now though, they have this very strange looking inlet really in the bottom part of the side pod, which is presumably to create more outwash to the bottom of the floor. At least that's what a couple of engineers have said. But this does seem like a pretty major departure from their previous version. Maybe it's just this angle where it looks slightly more severe than it would otherwise. But yeah, it definitely seems like they're playing around here with the aero. One wonder if we'll see any Flovis paint on it this weekend if the rain isn't going to wipe it off, which it might well do in FP1 if it is wet tomorrow. But yeah, this is probably the most striking visual change of the lot from pre-Belgium to the Spa Grand Prix now, where you've got this seemingly brand new side pod design in some way. So will this give them the performance they're looking for? Because for a couple of years now already, Mercedes have said, oh, the side pod, it doesn't matter too much. But I'm pretty sure it was either Mike Crack or it was Andreas Stella, one of the two from Aston Martin or McLaren respectively, that said, actually no, the side pod is a big deal, and teams that are playing it down don't realise the significance of it to their car. And maybe Mercedes are finally realising that actually, yeah, the side pod is pretty important to these regulations, which maybe they didn't fully initially appreciate. So Brian Sullivan here says, who's actually an engineer that understands some of this stuff, with the intention to, you know, more aggressive downwash, a concave lower surface, which increases, you know, concave would be a nice word of me to use earlier, wouldn't it? So yeah, it's a bit concave, which increases outwash near the floor edge. Better downforce, better flow. But, you know, it's funny, right? Because every time you look at an upgrade, engineers will say, oh yeah, it's doing this to make this happen and it's going to be more downforce and more performance. But they also tend to say the same thing at the start of the season, even if the car isn't turned out to be pretty good. They always talk about the ideas behind it. Whether it works in reality is a very different story to what they're trying to accomplish by some of these changes. A couple of other things as well. Aston Martin are also bringing updates. So it's Aston, it's Mercedes, and it's Alpine, I think, this weekend that are bringing things. Maybe something for McLaren as well. Not exactly sure on that quite as of yet. New floor updates and new low downforce rear wing for Aston Martin, apparently, and also this new front wing looking thing for Alpine. Now, look, if they can finish the race, I think that'll be pretty good going for them. But a rather, you know, exciting and jagged looking front wing compared to some of the other ones that you tend to see up and down the grid. So will this work for Mercedes? I mean, look, honestly, if Max doesn't win by more than 30 seconds at this track with that car that's so good around here at, you know, what happened last year at this circuit, that would probably be a success, to be honest. So we'll see. And the wet conditions might throw things around. It's going to be difficult to maximize the potential of this upgrade immediately when there's barely any time to get it ready, but that's the nature of these sprint weekends. Also, there's been some rumors that the DRS advantage from Red Bull, which seemed to be diminished somewhat over the last couple of races, Hamilton certainly mentioned it, is due to different setup choices and downforce levels. The rumor has it that that DRS advantage is going to be back this weekend in force. So I guess stay tuned for that one. But yeah, Red Bull aren't slowing down by any means. And just to look here what the weather says. So FP1 tomorrow is a very likely chance of rain. Poor visibility is very possible. Qualifying a 60% chance. That, of course, is for Sunday's Grand Prix. And then on Saturday, sprint shootout. The current chance of rain is 40%. The sprint is looking very much to be wet. And then the race is 50-50 pretty much as it stands. So bit concerning, but we shall see. I know that the drivers and the teams will not do any running if they feel like there is a potential safety concern, especially with the events of the recent weeks. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.